over here.
Amongst the fourth estate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go.
How come my kids won't answer my phone?
That they were all in it together. That there was a moment in time in which one day you woke up, well, let's say you woke up on a Saturday and the world was complicated, but it really hadn't reached you yet. And the next day, Sunday, all the world's complication was in your front yard. That was it was in the family, it was around the family dining table, in which everybody said, what are we going to do now? This is the greatest. Periodically, Americans particularly come to that point where there was a great unification of purpose. We've experienced it in our own lifetimes. But of late, it lasts for a while and it slowly begins to dissipate. The thing about that era from 1941 to deep into 1945 is that was a very, very long time for all of us to consider the fact that, number one, hey, there's a war on, don't you know that? And two, we're all in this together. So the great commonality of the purposes, I think, is why I go back to it again and again and again for new examples of what is an old story, but should and will unfortunately probably become new again. I think the thing we aim for in all of those endeavors is to make the audience who's sitting at home, no matter how age they are, how old they are, or even what their gender is, to wonder, well, what would I do in the same circumstances? The stories that we tell on film are extremely personal, in which the details matter more than any overall picture or overall strategy. We don't have a lot of maps. We might have a little bit of explanation just to set up the context, but it really did because of them the story of Doc Rowe or Dick Winters or characters like Snafu or Eugene Sledge. It's about the individual guys and what they went through for a big chunk of their times. They were all involved in this for about somewhere between 3 to 5 years of their lives, and during a big chunk of that time, no one had any idea what the outcome was going to be. That establishes, I think, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of like a petri dish for emotional understanding, in which we do not just celebrate the nostalgia of it all, but we celebrate the human endeavor.
Really good. You're good.
Nick and his late friend Stephen Ambrose had this notion as history professors there ought to be a museum for D-Day. Congress said, no, we're going to make it the American Museum for World War II. Didn't have any money, so we're here to help them with money, but everyone in America ought to see it, and the people who do see it walk away bedazzled, and I think humbled by what everyone went through.
One more, just two Toms over here on the left. And Tom over here, please. One more right.
The Greatest Generation, when I wrote it, really was a tribute to my parents and to that generation, never believing that it would exceed or succeed as much as it did in touching the lives of their children and others who came along later. I lived on an army base during World War II. I was 3 years old, I wore a helmet every day, and I fought the Germans and the Japs and all the ditches on the way to school. And everybody around me was going to war, coming home from war, and it was going 24 hours a day. And then the 50s came along, those guys came home from the war, and America was in an economic boom that was unprecedented. And they didn't want to talk about it. We didn't have to think about it.
Yeah. Starting with George right here. And right here, so straight ahead. One more. And right here for Ron.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We had 16 million veterans who needed their stories told in an epic museum, and that's what we've tried to do. So as Tom Hanks just said, it comes right down to the personal stories, the guys in the planes, the guys on the ground, the guys in the boats, and what they were up against back in World War II. And those are extraordinary stories, and we needed some champions nationally to give us credibility and authenticity when we were very young. And Stephen Ambrose was the original visionary, saying something's got to be done in this country to get this museum to preserve these stories.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.